resolution today is that the U.S. should adopt the 2004 European Union standard for labeling genetically modified foods. My definitions include genetically modified foods are foods that have been altered to produce desirable qualities such as resistance to pests or inclement weather or to increase consumer appeal. GMF are commonly referred to as GM or GMO for genetically modified organisms. The European Union is an economic and political union established in 1993 after the ratification of the Maastricht Treaty by members of the European Community, which forms its core. In establishing the European Union, the treaty expanded the political scope of the European Community, especially in the area of foreign and security policy. The Food and Drug Administration, also known as the FDA, is a federal agency in the Department of Health and Human Services established to regulate the release of new foods and health-related products. The Environmental Protection Agency, also known as the EPA, is an independent federal agency established to coordinate programs aimed at reducing pollution and protecting the environment. The United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, the federal department that administers a program that provides services to farmers, including research and soil conservation and efforts to stabilize the farming economy. My harm today is that food labeling guidelines, especially in the U.S., makes it difficult for people to know what they are eating, genetically modified foods. This takes away the right for a consumer who has no desire to eat such products, the ability to choose not to. This is of great concern, especially for those individuals that suffer from food allergies. Even when a food is marketed as containing GMO, packages will not indicate which genes have been inserted into those foods. Therefore, people who experience an allergic reaction to a food may not be able to determine whether it was the original food protein or a GMO protein or other substance that triggered that reaction. The significance of this is that it is greatly significant due to the fact that it has the potential affecting all people who eat food. As stated by the USDA 2004 statistics, U.S. accounts for nearly 2/3, or 110.22 million acres of biotechnology crops planted globally. The U.S. is the largest contributor. The inherency, the cause of the problem is that by not having labeling on GMO products, consumers are unable to make an educated decision regarding products that they ingest, thus subjecting themselves to potential harm. Without addressing the labeling concern, not only will the problem continue, but it will also escalate to an unknown level. Timeliness. As stated in Europa GM Food and Feed article written in 2003, unlike the U.S., all GMO foods are labeled in the European Union and have been since 1997. Because there is such an expansion in the GMO industry, now is the best time to begin labeling so that the GMO products become more prevalent. Consumers can access the vital information for making an educated decision. My plan includes this. The mandate should be that the U.S. should adopt the EU standard for labeling GMOs. The EU recognizes the consumer's right to information and labeling as a tool for making an informed choice. Since 1997, community legislation has made labeling of GM foods mandatory for products that consist of GMO or contain GMO, and also products derived from GMO but no longer containing GMO if there is still DNA or protein resulting from the genetic modification present. As stated in Europa GM Food and Feed article written in 2003, the Council of Ministers formally adopted 2 European Commission proposals on genetically modified organisms, which has established a clear EU system to trace the label GMOs and to regulate placing on the market and labeling of food and feed products derived from GMOs. This new legislation will consolidate a trustworthy and safe approach to GMOs, GM food, and GM feed. It will ensure full traceability of GMOs throughout the chain from farm to table, and will provide consumers with comprehensive information by labeling all food and feed consisting of, containing, or produced from a GMO. Traceability provides the means of track of movement of GM products through the product and distribution chains. Traceability for certain products has existed for many years. However, specific traceability requirements for food that contain GMOs or are derived from GMOs do not currently exist. Traceability will also facilitate monitoring of any effects on the environment, accurate labeling, and the control of labeling claims. It additionally would enable products to be withdrawn from the market if any unexpected adverse effects were to arise. My agency would be that labeling GMOs will require no new agencies. The USDA and the EPA are more than adequately set up to help the new labeling system, as they already oversee the regulation of GM foods in the U.S. All that would be required is for a law to be passed that would require the USDA and the EPA to incorporate the new labeling system in the present labeling system. The staff, this mandate will create no new need for extra staff. All that is being done is changing the present labeling to incorporate the new system. Funding. This mandate will also create no new need for extra funding. The new labels will be no different from the old ones, except for the fact that it will require to say whether the product contains GM products. The enforcement already pre-existing organizations, the FDA, USDA, and the EPA, will enforce the new labels just as they did all the old ones. Therefore, the process of changing to new labels will require a minimal amount of change in all aspects.
Okay. Are you aware, Tasha, that GM foods are currently being tested?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Are you aware that thus far there have been benefits to crops by being genetically modified, such as pest-resistant, herbicide-tolerant, and sustainability in harsh environments?
Yes, I am aware of that.
Okay. Would you agree that U.S. farmers have already widely adopted GM crops?
Absolutely.
Do you agree that with nonprofit organizations like Rockefeller, GM food could be distributed to regions where hunger is prevalent?
I don't know enough about that, but I'm sure it's potential.
Okay. Are you aware that GM foods have the same nutritional value as conventionally bred crops as stated by the FDA?
I was not aware of that.
Are you aware that there are no reports of anyone having an allergic reaction to a genetically engineered product that was approved for human consumption?
No, I was not aware of that. Which one is
Yeah. I think I'm just going to skip right into my speech here. That's all the questions for today. Thank you very much. All right. To address my opponent's harm or the lack of labeling, Lisa Dry, Director of Communications for the Biotechnology Industry Organization, BIO, a consortium of biotechnology companies, states, because these foods are indistinguishable from foods produced through conventional means, it would be misleading to consumers to label them. We support the science-based, content-based labeling system that the FDA has put in place. If food is changed in composition, if it has a different nutritional value, if an allergen has been added, then it should be labeled. And this is from Allergy Health Online, Allergy and Asthma Encyclopedia. Quote, proteins that are known to cause allergens are not allowed to be used in GMO foods. And this from the CQ researcher. In addition, scientists generally believe that the public is overly skittish about the new technology. The bottom line is that no one has died of eating genetically modified crops, notes Peter Day, director of Rutgers University Biotechnology Center for Agriculture and the Environment. And people die all the time from eating contaminated food. Significance. Tasha said it affects everybody. This is from the CQ researcher. Biotechnology advocates point out that there have been no reports of anyone having an allergic reaction to a genetically engineered product that was approved for human consumption. Quote, did they look at every single compound in the plant? No, says biotech consultant Macy, but because we know a lot about the biochemistry of plants, there are certain things that we can predict can happen. And you said, Tasha, that this is significant because it has the potential of affecting anyone who eats food. I agree with your statement. In fact, the CQ researcher states, companies are also focusing on solving world hunger by creating drought-resistant seeds or nutritionally superior third world staples. For example, in 1999, researchers in Europe announced that they had genetically engineered a highly nutritious golden rice that could combat vitamin A deficiencies, a major cause of blindness in poor countries. Lately, this project has been taken up by the nonprofit organization, the Rockefeller Foundation, and a few other nonprofit organizations that have been distributing this rice free of charge to countries who are too poor to buy it otherwise. And it is hoped that more organizations will follow the lead of the Rockefeller Foundation. On another front, scientists are developing bananas and tomatoes that can deliver vaccines, potentially saving millions of lives in developing countries. Agriculture, biotechnology has come of age. Representative Nick Smith, Armich, chairman of the House Science Committee's Basic Research Subcommittee, wrote to a college last year, quote, "The potential benefits to mankind are limited only by the resourcefulness of our scientists." To address Tasha's inherency that GMOs need to be labeled so that people can make educated decisions, this is from the CQ researcher. Food produced using biotechnology has been on the grocery store shelves since the mid-1990s, according to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. About half of the soybeans and 1/4 of the corn grown by the U.S. have been genetically modified. An estimated 2/3 of the processed foods in supermarkets in the U.S. contain genetically engineered corn, soybeans, or other crops. Currently, these foods do not have to be labeled as GM products, except when the nutritional value of the food has been significantly altered or there's a health concern. All products containing the label, the organic label, cannot be produced using GMOs. To address Tasha's timeliness. Now is the best time to be labeling so that consumers can access vital information. This is from the CQ researcher. Biotech consultant Macy says labels would only confuse consumers because even conventionally bred crops are genetically altered through crossbreeding techniques. Quote, "A label that says the food has been genetically modified is misleading because everything in the store today is," she says. "You'd have to say it has been modified with recombinant DNA techniques, which most people won't understand." This is from the CQ researcher. Food industry representatives worry that labels might scare away consumers who don't know enough about biotechnology. Labeling GMOs could also open the floodgates to other labeling requirements, such as stating whether the food was gathered by migrant workers, they say. GM food is the way of the future. True, it is a young science that has not yet fully proven itself. But we cannot continue to grow crops the way we have always grown them. With an ever-increasing population that needs feeding, foods that can be grown faster, safer, and more abundantly will be the only answer to the ever-growing problem. Putting more regulations on foods that in 9 years has not proven itself to be largely harmful will only hamper their progress and hold back this much-needed change. Like all new technology, there will be glitches and failures. Flight technology has been around for over 100 years, and still there are problems and failures. But we still embrace it today because it is now essential to our survival as a society. And to address Tasha's mandate, the U.S. should adopt UE standards for labeling GMOs. This, as stated by Peter W.B. Phillips and Grant Isaac University of Saskatchewan, Canada. Quote, "There are currently only 5 countries that regulate genetically modified organisms. Canada, U.S., Mexico, Japan, and the European Union have all considered the appropriate role of labels in signaling these new product methods to consumers. Each of the 5 countries currently regulates the introduction of GMO products, but only the UE requires labels that specify the presence of GMOs. GMA, the Grocery Manufacturers of America, advances the interests of food, beverage, and consumer products industry on key issues that affect the ability of brand manufacturers to market their products, strongly opposes the mandatory labeling requirements for biotech foods encompassed in the current European labeling requirements, and expanded upon in the proposals. They believe such labeling has the potential to significantly mislead consumers into believing that biotech foods are somehow different or less safe than conventional foods when scientific experts and institutions worldwide, including those in Europe, have stated they are not. Furthermore, European and American policymakers have developed policies that facilitate consumer choice for products with reduced pesticides, not through a contaminated pesticides residue label, but through an organic label. Following this model, the European policymakers should provide for and encourage voluntary labeling for non-biotech products in the marketplace for those consumers who want to avoid biotech products rather than label all biotech products. This is consistent with the approach of the U.S. government. And to address Tasha's agency, staff, funding, and enforcement, agencies capable of handling the new system, she said, the FDA counters that the agency currently does not have the time, money, or resources to carry out exhaustive health and safety studies of every proposed GM product. Moreover, the FDA policy as it exists today does not allow for this type of intervention. On the whole, agriculture business industries believe that labeling should be voluntary and influenced by the demands of the free market. If consumers show preference for labeled foods over non-labeled foods, then the industry will have the incentive to regulate itself or risk alienating the customer. The FDA contends that GM foods are substantially equivalent to non-GM foods and therefore not subject to more stringent labeling. If all GM foods and food products are labeled, Congress must enact sweeping changes in the existing food labeling policy, and this would waste unnecessary time and resources. Oh.
Okay, I'm ready. Would you agree that there is potential of a consumer having an allergic reaction to GMO foods?
Yes, I would say there is a small potential.
Would you agree then that if consumers were able to determine what proteins have been tampered with, that they would then avoid those substances that they know they are allergic to?
Yes.
You stated that if food is changed in composition, if it has a different nutritional value, if an allergen has been added, then it should be labeled. So would it then make sense that labeling would benefit consumers, especially those that suffer from food allergies?
Yes.
Is it possible that since the introduction of GMO, there are new proteins that are being created, thus we don't know if an allergen is being created?
Possibly, yes.
So would you agree, because GMOs are new to the industry, fairly new to the industry, they've only been in existence for the past 10 years, that we don't know all the potential allergens that are being created?
Well, for the past 10 years, they haven't proven harmful, and they're largely harmful in any way to humans. And so in 9 years, that's a long time to not have any problems with GMOs.
But it's still, you still agree that there is the potential of allergies
There is
arising?
the potential, yes.
Okay.
You have it.
Please restate your source that stated that consumers would be confused by labeling.
That was biotech consultant Macy, I believe.
I'm finished with my questions. You need to stop that because you're making me nervous. I'm ready, Rob. Okay, first I would like to state that in my first speech, my source for the 1997 community legislation has made labeling of GM foods mandatory for products that consist of GMO or contain GMO, and also products that are derived from GMO but no longer containing the GMO, though there is still DNA or protein resulting from the genetic modification present, is from CQ Researcher. I want to clarify that I did get that from CQ Researcher. First, I would like to state that one of Dale's main sources of information is from a biotech consultant. A consultant would do everything in her power to support the industry she is consulting for, including downplaying a necessary change, by stating that it would confuse the consumer if the products were labeled as a direct insult to consumer intelligence. Dale also stated that there are no known reports of people dying from GMO. Though I agree with this statement, we are not arguing whether GMOs will kill people. I am stating that the long-term effects of GMO is still unknown, thus taking into consideration that there is a potential of a negative impact is warrant enough to address the need for educating the public through the means of labeling products. Dale agrees that there is potential of a consumer having an allergic reaction to a GMO food. He also agrees that labeling the products could benefit those that have known food allergies. Allergy Health Online from the Allergy Encyclopedia states that experts believe GMO foods have the potential to affect allergies in two separate ways. First, creating new allergens. An allergen is a substance that triggers an allergic reaction. Because genetic modification introduces new proteins to a crop, there is potential to create a new allergen. This is a particular concern since the new allergens will be known and therefore allergies to these substances will be more difficult to diagnose. It is also important to note that it takes time for allergens to build in a person's system, that though initially they may not react strongly, over time the reaction can become very strong. There is also the risk, secondly, there is also the risk of turning a previously safe food into an unsafe food for people who are already allergic to a particular type of protein. This risk is of special concern because GMFs are not labeled as such. However, foods that are labeled organic have not been genetically modified. Dale has also agreed that this is a potential risk. Dale mentioned that the potential of solving world hunger through genetically modified foods, and though I admire the cause and agree that the world could benefit from such progress, I think it is just as important to keep in mind that labeling products will in no way inhibit such progress. U.S. has 63% of globally land area devoted to genetically modified foods, this from the CQ researcher. In the article, Genetically Modified Foods, Harmful or Helpful, by Deborah Whitman, she states that in January of 2000, international trade agreement for labeling GM foods was established. More than 130 countries, including the U.S., the world's largest producer of GM foods, signed the agreement. Policy states that experts must be required to label all GM foods. So no matter what, if the U.S. plans to export their products, the international community will demand labeling. If it is required internationally, then why not include it on our own products in the U.S.? Regardless of whether the FDA has time or money to address this issue, it will eventually have to be, so why not address it now? Dale said, on the whole, agricultural business industries believe that labeling should be voluntary and influenced by the demands of the free market. If consumers show preference for labeling foods over non-labeled foods, then the industry will have the incentive to regulate itself or risk alienating the consumer. If labeling of processed food GMOs was left up to the discretion of the producer, it is highly unlikely that they would do any labeling. This from Dale's source, Peter Phillips and Grant Isaac from the University of Canada.
I am ready. Actually, a really good timing. Okie dokie. In response to Tasha's first statement, I should think that a consultant to the biotechnology industry would know best about what the issues are concerning the biotechnology industry. Macy is considered an expert in her field, and therefore has the knowledge and experience to make informed decisions on the subject. If it were otherwise, she would not be working as a consultant for some of the largest biotechnology companies in the country. And I have evidence here from the same source that Tasha used, Allergy Health Online, Allergy and Asthma Encyclopedia, to address the allergy issue that the current regulations in the U.S. outline the testing requirements for GMO foods. These regulations include, 1, the biotechnology industry is responsible for conducting safe testing of GMO products. 2, the U.S. FDA regulations require that companies using genes that are known allergens must perform allergenicity tests on the food product. 3, all test results are reviewed by scientific experts at regulatory agencies, including the FDA, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. In addition, the Allergy Health Online also states that internationally, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the U.S., of the United Nations, FAO, and the World Health Organization, WHO, have developed recommendations for GMO research and production. There are different recommendations for known allergen sources versus sources that are known to be allergens as follows. 1, known to be allergens, the FAO and WHO define any GMO foods that contain unknown allergens to be likely to be allergenic. They then recommend that all development of such products to be stopped and the food not to be introduced into the market. Secondly, not known to be allergens. The FAO and the WHO recommend detailed testing to determine the product's similarities to known allergens, both food and environmental. Further testing is recommended to determine whether people with known allergens show symptoms to material that is broadly related to the source material. This is from the CQ researcher. Biotechnology advocates point out that there have been no reports of anyone having an allergic reaction to a genetically engineered product that was approved for human consumption. Do they look at every single compound in the plant? No, says biotech consultant Macy. But because we know a lot about the biochemistry of plants, there are certain things that we can predict to happen. To Tasha's statement that all exports are required to have labels for GMOs, and this means that we should also have them in our own country. The Grocery Manufacturers of America, GMA members, do not anticipate development nor marketing novel foods from GMOs in Europe in the near or foreseeable future due to lack of consumer acceptance of these products. Therefore, the labeling of exports would not be a problem since the exporting of GMOs is not seen as likely any time in the near future. Also, GMA supports the objective to enhance consumer information and confidence about the safety of biotech foods, as well as to facilitate consumer choice. However, they strongly oppose the use and question the ability of mandatory traceability and labeling of products containing or derived from biotechnology as a means to achieve the objective. Like the EU, the GMA and its members believe consumers should have access to information to assist them in their product purchases, and that this information must be truthful and non-misleading in nature. Consumers get information from a variety of sources, not just product labels, and that, together with this information, shapes their opinions about whether or not to buy certain products. So in closing, to label GMOs according to the GMA would not be advisable due to consumer speculation and lack of knowledge on the subject of genetically modified foods. I rest my case. Half as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Okay. I'm ready. First, I would like to address the Grocery Manufacturers of America's strong opinion in disagreeing whether something should be labeled or not. Unfortunately, the Grocery Manufacturers of America do not represent the world as a whole. And earlier in your argument, you did state that one of the benefits to genetically modified foods is solving world hunger. So I see an inconsistency in that argument, being that if we're going to solve world hunger, then we're going to be shipping it internationally. So as far as I'm concerned, that argument doesn't hold. Also, regarding FAO and the WHO, it also states in your article, you stated that they then recommend that all development of such products be stopped and the food not be introduced to the market regarding the allergens, the potential allergens. The ending of that statement is, however, the FAO and the WHO have no regulatory power over the research, monitoring, and ultimate distribution of GMOs to agricultural producers or to the general public. So, though they express their opinion, they have no authority. Also, you stated that not known to be allergens, that FAO and the WHO recommend detailed testing to determine the product similarities. Again, such FAO and WHO recommendations are not enforced, and compliance is up to the individual company. So regardless of what they say, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be followed through upon. My main point is that just because there are no known allergies does not mean that allergens may not occur, and that we should leave it to the right of the consumer to determine whether they wish to consume genetically modified organisms, especially because we don't know the ultimate result.